Oh, 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 my sinuses. Hey guys, what's up? So my part 2 discussing the books I read for January, since I read a lot of books in January. So the first 6 are in a part 1 video. These aren't in any order but the order I read them in. So yeah, if you want to check it out, let me know all your thoughts and feelings on the books I have read and discuss with me. Alright, so let's get in the video. Number 7 book on my list of things I've read is Children of Dune. Let me tell you something. Something you may not know about me. I love Dune. I love Dune so much. I listened to the audiobook of the first book, hooked. Because, you know, I was kind of like, oh, I have to read Dune because, you know, it's pretentious and, like, all the underlying metaphors. But whatever. That book is so good. Like, okay, first of all, the audiobooks for the Dune series, you have to listen to the ones that has the cast of actors. Because, oh my God, it's good. The majority of it's narrated by this one guy who does a good job, but the first and second book I was able to find narrated by a cast of people, and it was very, very good. It definitely enriched my listening. Also, it helps that to listen to it because they're rather long books, and just listening to it makes it easier because, you know, you can do other stuff while you're listening to it. So, on to my review of Children of Dune. Alright, so I'm about to get into spoiler territory because I can't really talk about the third book in the Dune series without spoiling things. You see them? What are you doing, Sophie? Sophie! I can't really talk about the third Dune book without spoiling the first 2 books. So, this is your warning. Okay, so this book takes place 9 years after the end of Dune Messiah. And so everyone thinks Paul Atreides is dead. And so this takes place 9 years after the end of Dune Messiah, the second book. And it is about Leto and Gamina, who are Paul's twin children. So they are under the charge of Aaliyah, and they are still on Arrakis. And at this point, there's been a lot of change on Arrakis. So more water, more lush greenery, and all that stuff. And everyone's like, oh my God, like this is all cool and everything, but if we do this, what about the sandworms? Like they're gonna die, and we're not gonna have any of that good spice. And so it's basically, that's one of the major conflicts, but also Aaliyah, since she is one of the, what do they call them? The preborn or something, where because her mother consumed the spice, she got all those memories and links to the past. She can communicate with the past, but the bad thing about that is that you can become possessed by someone in the past. And that's what happens to Aaliyah with the villain from the first book, Baron Harkonnen. Yeah. And so the twins are also at risk of getting possessed because they're also able to achieve this. So then Lady Jessica comes, and there's all these plots and all this crazy stuff happening, and it was a 5 out of 5. Yeah, so just like every Dune book I've read so far, it's 5 out of 5. Like, I can't wait I'm waiting for my Audible credit for February so that I can listen to the 4th one. I got the whole 6-set Dune box set for Christmas. Like, I am hyped. Highly recommend this series. One thing I will say, it's very technical. It's kind of laborious to read. That's why I would highly recommend the audiobook over it. And it's definitely one of those books that I feel like no matter how many times I read it, I can always find something new in it. And I will admit, I did go consult Google just to be like, okay, did I miss anything in that chapter? Just like I did whenever I read Pride and Prejudice in high school. So don't be embarrassed to have to consult things. And if you have someone to talk about the story with, that's even better because y'all can like share opinions and stuff. That's why I want people in my life to read Dune so I can talk to them about it. Woo! All right, so on to the next book I read, which was the manga Orange. Alright, so I had heard about this book from Books with Chloe, and I love anime and things like that. I'm getting more into manga with me reading a lot of Junji Ito stuff, Beastars, The Way of the House Husband. And so I ended up picking up this one. I haven't watched the anime, but I definitely wanted to read the manga before I watched the anime or anything like that. And I thought I could just read because it says the complete collection 1. I thought I could just read this and then go watch the manga, but it would seem I need to read volume 2, which I heard wasn't as good, but based on how this one left off, I need to read it. So the synopsis for Orange. Okay, so it is about this group of kids. So it's Naho, which is this little cutie, and excuse me if I mispronounce these, Keikoro, Suwa, and then the other 3 people, which are Takako, Azusa, and Hojita. Naho gets this letter in the mail that's from her future self saying that, like, hey, look, our friend Keikoro, yeah, he kills himself. So I need you to try to prevent that, but to also do this shit so that, like, I don't have any more regrets, because I regret a lot of stuff. Because Naho is this very quiet, meek, timid girl who often puts other people before herself. And basically her future self's like, it's cool to take care of your friends, but you need to do things for you. And so she has these letters written out to a certain point from her future self, and she kind of struggles with listening to them at first, and then starts to listen to them, and then the paths diverge, and she realizes, like, oh, she's making a difference in his life, and things like that. Now, how this one ended, it definitely felt like I needed to read the second one, because it wasn't necessarily a cliffhanger, but I still want to know what happens to all the characters. This book also flashes from the past in which, well, I guess the present in which she has received these letters and they're in high school, to the future when the group of friends, minus Keikoro, are mourning the death of him, because it's on, like, the day he had died, and it's just them going through and, like, talking about him and all this stuff, and, like, how they regret that they couldn't save him. A very, very good story, very heartwarming. I say heartwarming, it definitely deals with a very deep subject. And I really, really appreciated what Takano, the author, did with Keikoro's character and his depression, because that shit is relatable, okay? He didn't just make him some sad guy, He's like, he made Keikoro as this guy who, like, smiles through the pain and tries not to show it, and has real legitimate things that he's going through and hardships, and shows his struggle. And I really, really appreciate that. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was a very good representation of depression and how you don't always know, like, if something's wrong with someone. And it was just, of course, the flashes of the future were sad, but heartwarming to see Naho's impact on Keikoro and how she was able to change the course of fate. So I really, really enjoyed this. I would highly recommend this. And it looks thick, but being that it's manga, it's very quick to read through. Would highly recommend. Alright, so the next book I read was also a manga, and it is the third in not necessarily a series, but a collection, I guess you could say. Because let me just tell you this. It's Gaio. And the reason I say the third is because this is the deluxe edition, and I also have Tomi and Uzumaki, and I've read those. So this was the final one in the deluxe editions that looked like this that I had to read. And I have to say, so I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. And the reason I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars is because... So the reason I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars is because there were scenes in Uzumaki and Tomi that genuinely frightened me. You know what I'm talking about. If you read Tomi, then you know about the hospital pregnancy scene. That bullshit. But Gaio only got 4 stars because it didn't terrify me as much, but I will say the visuals, phenomenal. And there were certain parts where I was kind of laughing, like the part where like the whale comes out on the little legs. That one was kind of funny because it was like, a whale? That can't support him. And then sure enough, it like collapsed and couldn't support his weight. Io is about these, it's revealed later on where they came from and everything, but it's basically like these little robot sort of things, kind of, that attach themselves to the fish and bring the fish from the sea onto the water. Well, they give off this horrendous stench, and as it turns out, the fish are still alive, but eventually they start decaying and dying. And it seems like they're still alive because this gas is pumping through them and everything causing them to move, and that's how these little things that are attached to the bottom of them move. Well, once the fish are run out, they start reverting to people. And one of the first things we go through, well, actually something we go through throughout the whole book, is watching Tadashi and his girlfriend Kaori. And basically, Kaori becomes infected with whatever is going on, and it causes her to get these like boils all over her body and her to get like super duper bloated. And so he has an uncle that he thinks can help figure this out, and basically he has to watch as his girlfriend gets turned into one of these things because of his uncle and things like that. And the imagery, some of it was very, very frightening, considering that just, I don't know, it wasn't as frightening as Tomi or Uzumaki, and I think that's because the concept, well, the things that scared me in Uzumaki and Tomi were things that could really happen, like a woman stabbing herself in the ear because there's a spiral in it, because that's just how the human body is built. Whereas this was a little more unrealistic and things like that. I still enjoyed it a lot and did find some moments very horrifying, and really appreciated Junji Ito's talent for making these horrifying scenes, but it just didn't hit me like the other two did. That being said, would still highly recommend it. And one of the things that I really like about Junji Ito, because I know I just sat here and explained this and you're probably thinking, what the fuck, if you've never heard of this. But the thing about him is he takes these concepts that on paper seem absolutely ridiculous, like fish coming out the water and attacking people, that's not scary, but turns it into horror. Or like people being obsessed with spirals, that's not scary. But he has this way about his art style and his storytelling that he is able to turn these goofy sounding things into absolute horror. So I am very excited to have read this. Like I said, only 4 out of 5 stars because it didn't hit me like Tomi and Uzumaki did. But I also want to read some of his other stuff. Like I have The Dissolving Classroom. I want to get his version of Frankenstein and No Longer Human, because I need to read No Longer Human, but Frankenstein I read and I absolutely love that book. So I want to see his interpretation of it, because just as words alone, the Frankenstein story from the original book by Mary Shelley is rather terrifying. It's already a terrifying concept, but I want to see how he brings it to life, because I imagine it would be pretty cool. All right, so let's see. The next book I read, My Dark Vanessa. The synopsis behind this book is that, again, this is a story that takes place in 2 timelines. It flashes between the past and the present. The past is 15-year-old Vanessa at this boarding school as she navigates this relationship with her teacher, when in reality she thinks it's this loving relationship and all this stuff. He's just grooming her to be one of his sexual endeavors, and might I say, it's truly disgusting. So then it flashes to the future, 17 years later. So she's in her 30s by now. And this was in 2017, in the heat of the Me Too movement. And it's Vanessa and her life, and you watch and see how she has minimized the effect this man has had on her life, and how negatively he has affected her and her mental state, and how this situation has impacted her. You watch her minimize it and then slowly start to realize maybe this isn't something she should minimize, and maybe this had a much larger effect on her than it did. Now, this book, I really enjoyed it. I felt like as a woman, I could heavily relate to this and this subject, and there were scenes that I read that I was like, whoa, because it just felt so similar to encounters I have had and I know other women have had. This book was very difficult to read at times, and the reason for that is because as the reader, we are well aware this man, Mr. Strain, that's her teacher who she falls in love with, we as the audience and as adults reading this, because this is definitely not something for the youth, recognize the manipulation. The way he is manipulating her, the way he is grooming her so that she will be loyal to him and so that he can just pound it whenever he wants. And that's fucking horrible. I know I'm sitting here saying like throwing around all this negative energy, and it is not at the author. No, the author, Kate Elizabeth Russell, did a phenomenal job with this book. I felt like there was not a single point in this book that needed to be let out. I felt like there was nothing that needed to be added. I felt like she did a phenomenal job. It is the subject matter that gets me heated, and it's not like there's no fault in Kate Elizabeth Russell for writing this book, because this is a book that needed to be written. And I will stand by that 100%. This book just, oh my goodness gracious. It was deep. There were moments that were hard to read between the emotions she was going through. And then there were some moments that were just truly gross. Like this teacher, just his manipulation of her. I can't say it enough how disgusting it was. And you can't fault Vanessa for it because she was just tricked. And I did find it frustrating, even though all this evidence was coming out that this guy was a piece of fucking trash and that he was lying. Like she wasn't his only one. Even though all this came out, just like having to watch her deny it and say, no, he only loved me, what we have was special, hurt. It was so frustrating because you just want to tell her no, but at the same time, it's like people go through this. And this is something that needs to be talked about more, needs to be put out, and I'm just so happy this book was written. Another thing I will say on a separate note is that this book, I listened to the audiobook. I have the physical copy because I just like having the physical copy so I can mark it up and things like that. But this was one of the books I listened to on Libby. And I have to say, the narrator for this book did an excellent job, because in the times where it was in 2000 when it was naive young Vanessa versus the times when it was 2017 when it was jaded older Vanessa, the narrator's voice changed. When she was young and naive, she sounded like a young naive girl. When she was in 2017, this 32-year-old woman, she sounded broken and beat down, and like life just really stuck it to her. And that was an excellent touch to add to it. And then as she progressed in this, she got older, you could hear her voice like losing its naivety and its immaturity and becoming more adult and cynical. And wow, just, oh my goodness. Beginning, the author does state that this is fictional, and although the upbringing of Vanessa versus the upbringing of her living in like Maine and all this stuff is very similar, this is not something she actually went through. This is still something that people go through. Like, this is something that a big old spotlight needs to be shown on, because this is like important to talk about, and it's hard. This stuff is hard to read about, but it's worth it. Like, just for the deep emotional feelings I felt while reading this, phenomenal. Now, speaking of deep emotional feelings, I'm going to get to the last book. And My Dark Vanessa impacted me, but it didn't impact me like this book did. Now, as I've talked about, I've read Educated this month, which was a memoir, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Last year, I read Michelle Obama's Becoming. I read Becoming. I've read The Glass Castle. I read, oh my God, about, what is that name called? Oh my God, I can't remember the book's name. The one about the woman who, it was something 7 names, like My 7 Names or something like that. from the woman who defected from North Korea. That was phenomenal. So I've read a good bit of memoirs. I have to say, out of all of them were phenomenal, but out of all of them, Michelle Obama's Becoming was my favorite. It was inspirational. It was beautiful. And having Michelle read it to me on Libby heightened the experience. I felt like Michelle was there talking to me. It was amazing. But I have to say, my sweet goddess Michelle has been usurped. I still love her deeply. But there is a new goddess in town. And that is Chanel Miller and her book, Know My Name. Oh my God. This book, this memoir. Wow. So, Know My Name is about Chanel Miller, who for the longest time was just known as Emily Doe. And she was the victim in the Stanford rape case. I'm sure you all have heard of it. It was of Brock Turner, this ugly ass motherfucker, who took advantage of who took advantage of Chanel while she was unconscious and drunk and proceeded to rape her. And this memoir follows the proceedings of what happened from Chanel waking up in the hospital completely unaware of what happened to her because she was out. And like she had to have been told her feelings and emotions she felt when she had to have been told that they think she was raped. To the court proceedings, the media just basically fucking with her life, having to go through all of this court stuff, and it was just wow. Even if you haven't been in the situation Chanel is in, which I pray to God y'all haven't been, this is another book that as one woman to another, there were points in this book I could so heavily relate to. From the getting catcalled by random people all the fucking time and them not realizing this isn't cool, to just being felt like you're lesser just because you're a woman. Like one of the things that they really highlighted and talked about, and this isn't in the book, this was in real life, how Brock Turner was, instead of being known as the Stanford rapist and the books or the newspapers publishing this, he was known as this great athletic, like they focus, one thing she points out is how they so heavily focused on what Brock's potential and the potential of things he had to lose, rather than thinking about what Chanel is going through and what Chanel has lost. Because yeah, at first, she, like, whenever she didn't really know what's going on, she's like, yeah, I'll be fine. But as you watch her breakdown and the stress that is put on her from these court hearings, to having to do all this, to presenting herself in the right way, to presenting herself as the perfect victim so that she can win this case, it's tiring just reading about it. I can't imagine what it was for her to go through that. But I don't know, she still had, even though we're sitting here listening to these court proceedings and all this stuff and getting so frustrated at them, they keep pushing things back. The defense attorney freaking grinding on Chanel, asking what she was wearing and trying to frame it like it was her fault or like she consented, is so painfully frustrating. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel as she gets through the end of it. However, even at the end, as I don't know if y'all follow the case or not, but that man, Brock Turner, who was found guilty of 3 felonies because with the whole rape and everything, only got 6 months. 6 months in prison. But wait, that's not all. Guess what else? He only did 3 months because of good behavior. When I found that out, I'm sitting there texting my boyfriend like, I can't fucking believe this. I'm gonna go fucking find Brock Turner myself. Fuck that guy. Like, oh my gosh. But I will say, and this is not something that I don't think was mentioned, well, this was kind of brought up in the book, but I did a little more research, was that the judge who did sentence that did get, he actually got recalled, so he's no longer a judge. Then he was like some kind of tennis coach at this prep school or something. He got fired from that because of his verdict. At least Chanel was able to turn this process into this, what happened to her, into something not necessarily good, but better. She was able to come forward and talk about what happened. And even though that must have been immensely hard for her, it's amazing for the people who have gone through things like her to read about it and see that she got through it, she fought through it, and yes, it's going to be fucking hard, but she was able to work her way through it, and that they can too, that there is someone out there that has gone through what they can go through and they can relate. And I immensely appreciate that, because there were some parts that in this book that hit home hard. Like, My Dark Vanessa was hard to read, but this, at times, I got emotional and I had to put it down and just say, I need a second. So, definitely would recommend reading Know My Name. If you're going to pick up any memoirs this year, this one. Of course, Michelle Obama, Becoming, that's a great one, but this, and another thing I really, really appreciated about this is that the Libby app, she reads it. Chanel Miller herself reads it. And I really appreciate that, because I love when the author reads their own book, especially when it's something deep like this, like a memoir. I love that, because you get to listen, hear to what she was feeling, and I absolutely love that. So those were all the books that I read in January. I'll link the first part somewhere up here as usual in the description. I will include my Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, and I'll put the list of books I read this month. And please feel free to talk about stuff with me in the comments. I love talking to you guys. I have a whole Instagram for books so that you can talk to me about it. Let me know your thoughts and feelings. I'd love to get the conversation going. All right, so until then, y'all have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.